Hello again, Steve here with a few comments on why it is maybe that some people would tend to want to destroy, whereas others would want to create. Um, I'm talking about this with respect to what's in the uh, YouTube conversations a lot now, which is that the rising stars of YouTube are being attacked and censored and so on by others. So you could say that those who are censoring them and so on, or have the tendency to want to destroy. They want to destroy what's coming up, right? Whereas the rising stars are creating content and they're basically wanting to be left alone. Essentially, they're wanting to be left alone. Um, so, and it's not surprising that when you fall out politically or you fall out ideologically, you'll have one tendency on one side and one tendency on the other. And the tendency of destruction tends to be the left, and the tendency of, as we would call it, the sort of neo-left, right? And the ones who want to create it, we call them the neo-right. I guess you could go that and say that. Now, I think there's no real one answer for this, even from what I'm thinking here. And of course, I'm not gonna conflate that my thinking is anything conclusive for sure. But the easy answer that I can come up with is that those who want to censor and put down those rising stars, they're threatened by them. I mean, they see their ratings and so on dropping, and they see these guys' ratings rising. And I mean, the funny thing of it is that a few years ago they were saying that these rising stars, who weren't really rising much at the time, were basically irrelevant. They're just a bunch of windbags sitting in front of a webcam and talking about nonsense. And then of course that nonsense got turned into the claim then eventually turned into they were spreading fake news. And now they're outright threats. So they're attacking, and they go as far as defamation. I mean, this is the thing is, for those who see their empires falling, they're willing to go to great risk of, because they go to great risk for, I think, one reason is nobody's ever challenged their narrative or to any great extent anyway. So it hasn't happened as often. I mean, it's been a business strategy to be able to defame and get away with it because it generally paid off. I mean, yeah, some people get sued for defamation, but in the whole aggregate of it, it was actually a great strategy to just attack people and then have them put down, right? So this is a different play though, because in those times back in the day, they weren't free falling. Right now they are, and these guys are rising, and these guys actually have some money too, collectively, if they can get together to actually have defamation lawsuits against some of these mainstreams, these destroyers who are wanting to attack those who are rising. So in that case, they're willing to risk that defamation because this is dangerous. This is their livelihood. I mean, they're falling. That's like a caged or cornered animal who will risk a great injury and go on the assault because it seems like it's their last stand. And that's what I see as going on here, and it's a human tendency. Right? A human tendency, we see it once again, we see it in animals. A cornered animal is very dangerous, right? And this is what the left, especially the leftist media, is right now. Is they may feel very much so like cornered animals because of these rising stars, and they know also that the rising stars are much more intelligent than them. I mean, they were able to come up with the grassroots, right? And they're harder to attack because a lot of them don't even have sponsors. They don't have corporations and media corporations and brick and mortar buildings and all that sort of thing. These rising stars have a webcam, right? So they have to go after the tech companies then to censor them and ban them and so on. And then so now they're having to move off to the alt tech, and they'll end by probably damaging these tech companies, because once you take off, I mean, if you talk a tech company into getting rid of a lot of its great customers, I mean, that's not a great strategy for the tech company, you wouldn't think. But once again, it's a bargain that's being played out in real time and very, very quickly right now. But it's also a microcosm of humanity at large, which is that there's always been this tendency of those who want to create and those who want to consume off of what is being created. And yeah. But it's more complicated though. It's more complicated than they just hate them. Because it's a strange situation, you know, like I think it's always this tendency that within a group where you have those who are having to feed off of those who create, there's a resentment towards that success, right? That rising success. There always is a human tendency. It's a human tendency, I think, because you have to consume off of it, and there you have to denigrate them to somehow lesser than their greatness. Because to admit their greatness is to kind of venerate them, but to put them down is to be able to destroy them in some way, consume off of them, and so on. And one of the things that the reason I say it's complicated, I think, is because clickbait is such a big thing. So it's actually profitable for the lamestream and the old media and so on, and that destroyer type of a side, to go after and to create clickbait and to use those people's names because they're becoming so recognizable. The biggest, of course, in the universe now is Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump is the biggest clickbait in the world. I mean, there's, like I said before, there's estimations that up to a third of Twitter's traffic has to do with Donald Trump in some way. So even though they hate him, right, they need him. It's like it's a strange situation, and I would say the same thing for, you know, the right-wing watch and these sort of middle tier, especially probably for them, middle tier media corporations. They need people like Molyneux and Styx and whatnot, Sargon and whatnot, to be able to lambast, because they're becoming recognizable name brands, so they think they can defame them, put a defamation claim in an article, and even though there's the potential that they get sued over it, it is clickbaity enough that they might get, you know, a rise in their clicks for the day. So it's really a strange thing. They don't like these guys, but they have to use their names because they're the producer, and they have to try to pony on to where the train is going, to where the attention train is going, and yeah, but it's an overall trend, right? Because, you know, like I say, I was reading this book here about totalitarian democracy, and that was a trend to go towards more collectivism for the last couple of 100 years, really. And I think we're starting to see a tide change. I mean, I saw it more than 10 years ago, but more than like 20 years ago with DTACs and whatnot. Close to 30 years ago, actually. But that's been a growing trend. I call it the freedom movement, right? And a lot of people who have not been aware of what's been going on, perhaps, they think that, you know, Donald Trump and so on is something that just happens. No, it doesn't just happen. I mean, there's a movement happening, and people take advantage of that movement. People who are extremely adept in it. And of course, you know, and then of course the intelligent, especially the younger men, which tend, especially in business and so on, who tend to be the most adept, right? Younger men. There's those who take advantage of it. And even older men, too, of course. So Trump's an older guy, but he was, you know, he had a lot of skills in a lot of other business. They can see this and take advantage of it. And I'm not saying that they maliciously do it. I think most of them, maybe even Trump, honestly believe that they're doing the right thing, and they're creating good content. So you can see guys like Styx and Molyneux and so on, extremely intelligent people. I mean, these are some of the most intelligent people of our times. Jordan Peterson. These guys are freaking amazing. They're so amazing that they are scary to those who cannot compete against them, right? And so therefore, their viewership is just going right through the roof. And these guys, the old media is dropping, so they have to attack. But for two reasons. One is they hate the rise because it's resulting in it's part of, they're being exposed and they're dropping, and these guys are rising. But also it's a strategy to try to grab onto some of that rising tide, even if it's defamation and so on, just so that they get the clicks. They're still trying to cater to their core, but by putting these guys down. But in a lot of cases, it actually backfires because somebody who was watching them, wasn't aware about them, they'll see that CNN is attacking them. They're starting to, not like CNN too much. They'll go, what's this guy talking about? So then they'll look over here, and they'll see something they like, and they'll actually stay over there. That's another. It's a really complicated thing. I mean, I know this anecdotally a little bit, because when I did that video about Kathy Newman and Jordan Peterson, I actually had somebody message me that said that he never heard of Jordan Peterson until he saw this interview. So it looked like, they brought Jordan Peterson on to try to attack him. He's one of the rising, and they're kind of falling, right? So they brought this guy on to try to attack him and knock him down. But what happened is some of their viewership sees him, and they stay with him and leave them. So it's really an interesting thing, and it's so what can we learn for ourselves about this? Well, I think anytime we can observe human nature, there's a microcosm of that human nature within us. There's a tendency within us to want to destroy what we're creating, and there's a tendency within us to want to create. And I notice that within myself. I notice that within myself when I get to a certain point in life. There's that destroyer will come out and want to be resentful for the self that wants to be successful. And therefore it will attack, and it's also it's also a way that we can better understand society and why so many people can begin to freak out. A lot of times it's because on an individual level, a lot of times it's a reaction to indoctrination, but on a greater level, if you stand back and look at it, it's not that unlike the caged animal or the cornered animal that feels no other way but to fight back. And so that's the nature of humanity as well, because fundamentally we are animals. We are, most of us are not very rational most of the time. And when we're threatened, because our stock is falling, or we see a potential threat in the future, and we see somebody who's taking that portion of it. It's just like you see two animals. One of them has got a hunk of meat, and another animal wants to take it. They might have been friends moments before, but they'll fight like fiercely for that piece of meat, because the threat is, I'm going to lose my life. I'm going to lose my livelihood. I'm going to lose what I've got. So I think it's a great observation to observe here now, and it's why I think some people, their mode of operating is the destruction of others, like sort of the leeching off of others' production, and a way of knocking them down so that they can level the playing field, right? Because now there's not as many people on the field, so they get more access to it, and others that just surge ahead based on the trend that they're running on, which is what this freedom trend is. And also they're very adept, and they're very intelligent. They're putting out great content, and they just naturally, there's the popularity of populism that's just following in behind them, and that is extremely scary to the entrenched interests who want to keep the status quo, if at all possible. But if the status quo is slipping away from them, they'll go on the attack rather than create some new content. Steve here again, great chatting. Talk again soon. Bye for now.